All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, so this week we covered chapter 6 in the text, understanding or justifying violence. I'm going to start with a quote, or not really a quote, but it talks about kids becoming so desensitized to violence, and because of movies they've watched and video games they've played. Do y'all feel like they're desensitized to the violence in the books we read, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think the chapter had talked about how the violence that's portrayed in books is very different from what's portrayed in like movies, TV shows, and video games and stuff. And what they're seeing in those other arenas are much more intense. They also have a visual.
I agree.
Right.
And I don't know, like as I was reading it, I was trying to think of like books that we read that are like violent. And like I know they had a couple of like examples of some things, but I was like, but none of those really compare to like what they could turn on the TV and watch.
Oh yeah.
Right. But do you think because they've been able to see these things on TV and in the video games that they're able to better picture what they're reading when they are reading a violent scene?
I think that helps in any scope, you know, being able to see, you know, books be made into movies or just movies in general. Like even when I read stories now, I can like picture it playing out in my head, even though the characters don't have, you know, actresses to go with them or whatever. But as far as violence, like I think they definitely have a visual. If they haven't seen it, unfortunately, in like a personal circumstance, you know, I think they now have something to go off of because of the news or something they can see on TikTok or literally anywhere out there. I don't know, desensitized is such a, it's true. I think it's very true.
Yeah. I just think like I said, the video games and stuff, they're more graphic and they're more dramatic. So I don't think they get like the full picture of what it really, because violence look different to anybody. So I think just thinking about that, it's like maybe.
Right.
Well, definitely like with the video games, especially, like it is graphic, but it's a computer.
Right.
So I think there's definitely a different element there.
But they also made the point with the video games is that the players are choosing the actions in the video games.
This is true.
So that makes it even more real to them. So, like
they're faced with a choice. They could do this or they could do that or whatever, and they're choosing to do this.
There's always been that argument, like, are kids becoming more violent, or they choosing more negative actions based off of what they're seeing on TV or the video games they're playing? I would argue that it's more so the video games, because they are having that choice at that point. TV, they're just watching something be done. They're not actively engaged in it. Whereas the video game, they are.
Right.
Yeah, I think that component of them getting to be the decision maker in it kind of adds like this level of reality that they wouldn't have when watching like a Netflix series or something like that. I think it makes it a little bit worse for sure.
Right.
Yeah, because I was thinking about like the situation where the boy shot his mom because she wouldn't buy the video game for him. And I was just like, because he's used to the violence in the video game. So shooting his mom was like, it was nothing. Like he didn't have any sense of, you know, like empathy.
But I think a good point of that is not only, I think in the video game, like they are also in control, but like their characters come back. They're never permanently gone. And I feel like they miss, like,
there's
I think
no
he had intention. Yeah, he had intention behind it in person, but I almost think he wasn't fully prepared for the consequence, like you're saying, Brittany, of afterward, because they don't have that in video games. They just you kill that level or whatever,
get another
you lose
life,
that game, and then you get another life and you come back, you know, the next time. So and there's no, like you said, there's no consequence for it. So real life is different for sure.
But then going back to the literature, do y'all have admin or school districts that push back on books because of violent nature?
I haven't.
I would say no, that not that I
Yes.
know. Mm-mm.
No, okay. So we have where I'm at, we've had books that we've been told we can't teach because of the violence in them. And
Mm.
What books?
one of them was The Hate U Give.
Okay.
I remember you
Did not
telling us
read
that.
Yeah.
There's like a long list, and I can't think of all the books right now, but there's like a published list that Douglas County just will not let us teach.
Mhm.
But I sit there and I argue the fact that most of these kids have seen the violence in person,
Mhm.
especially in the area I'm in. We have a really high rate of teen violence.
Mhm.
We have a high rate of gangs in our area.
Mhm.
So if we can't read books that deal with that and show the consequence side of it, that they're not getting through these video games or they're not getting through the movies,
Mhm.
then I struggle with that because they're not seeing it. They, like we were just saying in the video games, like they think, okay, well, I'll shoot this person or whatever, and then it'll be all right.
Mhm.
You're
there's
making me
another
think
lie.
of this. I can't even remember where it was. I know it was in chapter 6 where we read something about like the violence that's portrayed in a book to, I think it's here. Making sure it's like relevant, something about
Right.
that. Like
Mhm.
choosing appropriate curriculum and stories and having books like these available is critical in getting youngsters to identify with characters, even
Yeah, like
with violence included.
right. So are we picking books that have a lesson to them? Are we able to justify why we're choosing those books? I think there's a lot more. Yeah, they have the violent scenes in them, but there's a lot more to be taught with that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Um,
I
what
would
did y'all
agree.
Just
what did y'all think about the book that we read this week?
I really liked it.
I did too. I started off not liking it. I didn't like the way it was written, but that was just like, okay, get out of your feelings and just read it. And I was like, oh, this is a really great. I hated the ending.
Yeah, that cliffhanger.
I
was like, what? Am I
so, so I was
I thought maybe I was missing a page.
I was kind of where you are, Christy, like the way it was written, I didn't like it at first. So
Yeah.
I looked up an interview with Jason Reynolds,
Okay.
and he said the reason he wrote it like that is because the kid's in an elevator. And if you think about it, like the amount of time that we're actually in an elevator is a minute or two. If you
Mhm.
notice in the book, it could go 908, 908, 908,
Right.
and then it finally changed to 909.
Mhm.
Because that's the time span that he was in there.
Mhm.
And he said he wrote it like that because that's the way our brain thinks too. We don't think in complete sentences.
Mhm.
Like when we're going to plan something out, we don't sit there and talk to ourselves in complete sentences.
Mhm.
So he felt like writing this more in a poetry style was more how the kid's brain would think.
Right.
That's why
Sounds
he
like a
chose to do
reflection.
that. And there's an audio book of it, and Jason Reynolds actually does the audio book.
Mhm.
And he said the reason he does it is because he knows what points he was trying to get across, and he knows the way he wanted it to sound, and he doesn't feel like anyone else could do that justice.
This is true.
He said it was kind of like Boys in the Hood meets A Christmas Carol. That's how he described it. And I was like, okay, because like he sees all the like the Ghost of Christmas Past and all that going through. In the elevators, like each floor was a different person.
Right.
I was like, that's a pretty cool comparison.
Yeah.
I liked that though, all of the different people that he was encountering, and then like every single person that came to that elevator is somebody that he had lost to gun violence. You know, the same situation that somebody closest to him was just in, but also the same situation he had a choice to either continually perpetuate or make a different decision. And
Right.
so I thought that was really powerful.
Yeah.
The scene where he found out what his dad did,
Mm-hmm.
That was powerful for me, because he had looked, and I think that's a good lesson for kids. You look at somebody a certain way, but you don't really know their whole life.
Right.
No.
You think you do. I mean, this was his dad. He thought he
I was
knew
gonna
who
say
his
that
dad was.
especially when it comes to our parents, because they live literally a whole life before us.
Right.
And
Right.
I feel like you get a different version of them obviously when they're raising you, and then
Mhm.
sometimes, in adulthood you might find out some of their secrets.
Yeah.
Um
And I think that's a good lesson. Like, even if we're not talking about the family aspect, but like choosing your friends,
Mhm.
you only see what they want you to see.
Right.
Same thing with
Mhm.
social media, and
Mhm.
going back to the video games, you see what whoever created that video game wants you to see.
Right.
yeah.
Um,
I liked the girl that he had like kissed on the playground when
Danny.
that shooting happened. I mean, I didn't like that situation, but I liked her ghost and that she represented this other voice of reason of like, what if you miss? Like, what if it's like me and you hit the wrong person?
Mhm.
And that's also a choice to think about, like all these other people who have been affected, and he's right now just worried about vengeance and revenge for his brother. But it's like, what if you hurt someone that had nothing to do
You
with
do
it?
with it. Mhm.
right.
Then like, are you any better than the person, that
Mhm.
you probably mourned over at that time? No.
Right. And
Right.
like even with his dad, like how his dad killed the wrong person.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like you can't bring them back because like, oh, so sorry, wrong person.
Oops.
My bad. So it's like, okay. So now that had an effect because now that person's like, okay, you get the wrong person. Now I gotta come get you. So it's like
Yeah.
it's an endless cycle.
Literally an endless cycle. And I thought it was interesting. Like he's never held a gun before, never shot one before, anything like that. But he was certain, like after his brother's passing, like that was how he was going to handle it.
Mhm.
And it's like he really went in there with like not even a real plan. Like you think you're like that one, I can't remember his name, who came to the elevator and was like, what was it? Riggs? No. I'm trying to think of the friend, his brother's friend who had given him the gun. I can't think of his name.
Dang, Buck.
Buck.
That was
Yes,
it.
Buck.
I was
Because he
about to say
couldn't grow
Briggs, and
facial
I was like,
hair.
no.
Right.
He was saying like, you're not tough enough like to do it.
Right.
And I think in a way that could have kind of fueled him, but I was like, no, that's real. Like you've never done anything like this before. What are you doing? Like,
Right.
you're going to be the
He
person to
said he had a
solve this whole
soft
thing.
heart.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I thought it was kind of interesting, like they say how boys are not supposed to cry. And it's like
Mhm.
that's the society that puts it in your head that boys aren't supposed to cry.
Right.
It's like, but
Supposed to show
here he is
emotion.
feeling all these emotions and he doesn't know how to talk his way through it. Like, okay, like if I
But
go shoot
that
him, then somebody's gonna come shoot me. So it's like he didn't know how to process it. And I think that's
Right.
the important part. So the elevators to help him process, like you really know what you're doing. Like you're really just kind of like
Yeah.
you said, just going
I
with
think that's sorry.
no, you're
I
good.
realized I just cut you off and
No,
I was
you're
like, let me
good.
let her finish.
No, you're good. I was just like just kind of like just how he was trying to just think it through but he really didn't know what he was doing. So
Right.
Mm-mm.
He was
I
so
like to
focused
hear.
on those 3 rules.
mhm.
Yeah. And I think what you were saying, Christy, is a good point, is like that's what society teaches them. Like even if it's not this specific society that's centered around a lot of gang violence, like society in general teaches boys like not to show emotion, not to cry, not to talk about it, to hold it all in. And like that's the other problem in
Right.
that. So his only way to deal with it is the only way he's ever seen it be dealt with, which is
Mhm.
with more violence. And it's like that's that cycle that they're
Right.
continuing to pursue, and something that we need to break. And it's like, how would it be different if he did know how to handle his emotions and process them and stuff like that? And if he had been able to talk to someone, unlike what we kind of teach people, that this is not the way you have to handle it. There are other options. And I think that's why his brother actually crying and breaking like the rule was such the powerful ending that he needed. There at the end, before he decided like, well, I guess we never know what decision he made. But yeah, I think that's why it meant so much, because it's like, wow, like he's crying.
Right.
Now, did either of you read the graphic novel version of this?
Mm-mm.
Okay. There is a graphic novel, and I remember her saying that either one of them would be okay in like her introduction video. I was just curious, like if we were to give this to our students, which I don't even know what, I don't know that I would use this book in middle school. If I did, I would use like excerpts from it.
Right.
But having the graphic novel, the images there,
Mm-hmm.
how
Yeah.
much more real would it make this book?
Yeah.
So I would be interested to look at the graphic novel and see.
Yeah.
But-
I was like, definitely can't use it in, well, you can use it in, but you have to definitely, like I said, limit it to what you
Yeah.
show in the,
Right.
elementary side of it. But I think it's still like I said, it's still an important topic that,
Mhm.
you kind of have to talk about. And I thought about like, even with his mom crying, like he didn't even know they didn't know how to be there for each other. Like, I feel like even if he would have went in there and talked to her, but see, he didn't even know the background of his dad. So it's like, okay, nobody is talking about what's going on. Everybody's hush, 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 hush. It's a big secret. But no, let's talk about these things. Let's kind of get it out. And I think like, even like I said, if you do this book, talking about the importance of if things are going on, how it's important to talk about it. And, like when you're making your decisions and stuff, but
Right.
I think it's important.
I think, the smoke that kept engulfing the elevator while he was in there to the point where it got so thick that like he could barely breathe by the end of his journey down.
Mhm.
I kind of saw that as like a symbolism for maybe like a dark cloud or like a fog of grief. Like it was getting so
Right.
thick with each person that came in and just laid on like another layer. Like, are you sure you want to do this? What about what happened to me? What about what happened to me? And like that just kept literally piling on like his conscious, maybe. And that's why it got so heavy to where when his brother came in, somebody who didn't do stuff like that, it was just like this. It wasn't a breath of fresh air until the elevator opened and he was able to walk out of it.
Correct.
And when his brother said, what do you say? Are you coming with me? You're coming with us?
Mhm.
I feel like it definitely could go either way, but I took it as like, if you're going with them, like they're all dead. So are you going to be a part of the cycle, someone who's affected, by
Right.
gun violence, where like maybe you go out there and try to shoot this kid, but he's more skilled and he could shoot first? Like, I
Mhm.
don't know. Or are you coming with us to do the right thing? I feel like it could have kind of gone
Either way. Yeah.
either way, maybe. I don't know. I think it was more the first one because it's like, in a
Are you
way, I
gonna
could
go
see
down
how
this
like
path?
following his brother's footsteps, but it's like, well, no, that's not where you want to follow because he's going
Right.
back to, where he didn't exist. So maybe
Exactly.
that wouldn't be the person to follow, but
It's just like, even if he would have went and shot Riggs, you never know who was waiting after the fact.
yeah.
So it's
Right.
like
That
that
He
could
would
have
have
been
spent the rest of
immediate.
his life just looking over his shoulder. Something
Mhm.
they don't show you in video games.
Right.
Right.
The paranoia part of it, because it's like I said, you never know.
Because that's not the end. That wouldn't have been the end at all.
Right.
And it would have probably only made him feel better in that moment. Because
Mhm.
then what would have followed would have been a domino effect of his choices.
Mhm.
And
Yep. Kind
I
of like
think he
how his
really,
dad felt.
you have a chance to make a different decision, break the cycle. What are you
Right.
going to do with it? It's almost like those commercials that they used to play for like, what is it? The like stop smoking ones. And it would like give you a bunch of scenarios and then he would finish it off with like, what are you going to do? Or like, how are you going to handle it? And it
Mhm.
kind of like makes you feel like they were talking to you. And it's like, well, I don't know. This felt
Right.
so personal.
Mhm.
And kind of going back to like, he's never done anything like this before. Like he has what they call it a soft heart.
Mhm.
The
But
author,
it's like, is that a soft heart? Or are you just like a human being? I don't know.
and I guess maybe in their circle that would be
Mhm.
considered having a soft heart.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But the author said in his interview that he's spent a lot of time in juvenile detention centers, talking with the youth, and that a lot of them are in there from gang rivalries that they don't even know what started it.
Mhm.
That's a good point.
And I kind of feel like that was portrayed in this, like he didn't know what his dad did. He didn't know what started this long line of senseless deaths.
Mhm.
And I feel like that's where a lot of our students are. Even if we're not talking about gang violence, just the general like pettiness of middle school and high school and even elementary school nowadays.
Mhm.
Like my
It's like,
friend
so
said,
what is
you
all this
said
really about?
this. Yeah.
We
Like,
have that issue right now. Like I obviously don't teach middle school, but so like I coach cheerleading, and so I had a lot of girls coming in from middle school that are going to be incoming freshmen, and I had to let two of them off of the team for getting in fights in middle school, which really bothered me because our middle school never told us about it. Like we had to do like digging around, and I just thought that was like a really
yeah.
bad failure in like communication, because then they're
Yeah.
thinking like what they do over there will not follow them over here, and that's
Right.
just not
Mhm.
true. But anyway, they got in these fights, and like as we were talking to them while we were letting them go, and we were talking about like the root of the problem and stuff, it was just like as they were explaining it, they realized how dumb it sounded. And I
Right.
just kind of like looked at them, I was like, so was it worth all of that? Like,
Right.
because
Right.
she said this, she said that, and it's like like I felt bad, but I was just sitting there like, so like you had to smash her head in the locker, why?
Yeah.
Because she said she
Kid-
thinks you're fat, or that she doesn't like you, or that this or that.
Because it goes back to like the conversation about they don't think about the consequence part of it. Like there's no consequence or anything. Like so now, like if I'm going to high school and I'm like, I can't be on the team, but you didn't realize that while you were making this decision over something that was
Right.
really something so petty that wasn't even that big of a deal, and now you
No.
jeopardize your whole,
Kids nowadays really struggle with conflict resolution.
Mhm.
And I feel like their parents most of the time are not teaching them how to resolve conflict in a positive manner.
Right.
I think they always solve it for them too. Like I had that issues in my 11th
Right.
graders, not necessarily with like, violence or anything, but just even like
Just
simple stuff
general conflict.
within the classroom is like, so what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And they
Mhm.
were like, I don't know. And I was like, that's kind of a problem. Like
Right.
you're 17. We need to figure out how to solve our own issues. Like,
Exactly.
But I think bringing text like this into the classroom can open up those conversations on how to solve conflict.
yeah, I think that would be good.
Because I honestly think that's a whole nother curriculum in and of itself,
Mhm.
in the classroom, because it has become our job to teach them how to do that.
To teach them
Unfortunately,
everything, yeah.
um,
Just to be the other parent.
That's
right.
good.
But
Be parent at school.
with that being said, then you come across the task for authors in general. They're having to compete against video games and
Mhm.
movies to try to get kids engaged and want to read the books.
Yeah.
So are
That was
they
that question, I have it written down, where they kept asking like, should books contain more violence or something along those
Mhm.
lines to get readers to pick them up more.
to
And I
pull
was
them in?
like,
Yeah.
that's bad.
Right.
It is. It's sad that authors who are creating this wonderful literature for kids to read are
Mhm.
having to consider, should I add more violence in this?
Right.
But it's a weird thing because violence, they always say that like sex and violence and something else always draws in more views. Like when they're talking about making movies and stuff. And I'm ashamed to admit now that we're having this conversation, that's drawn me into like when I watch stuff online, like I like all the thrillers, all the horror and stuff like
Oh, I
that.
do
And
too.
Mhm.
the worse it is, the better.
Better. Mhm.
Right.
I feel so now that I'm reading all this, I was like reading this chapter and I was like, this feels very personal. But it's not, it's
You feel
also
like
not
they're
to say that
attacking me.
I do feel attacked.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I also don't play video games or anything like that. But then oddly enough, I pick up as an adult, I have more of a scope of literature that I can read. And I do read a lot of like murder mysteries and like thriller
Mhm.
novels. Like I'm reading this one right now, which is also really, really good.
Okay.
It's kind of long, but it's a really good book. And it's like it tops all the other kind of murder mysteries I've read. And I'm like, yep, this is the one. Like, this is it. All the details, like all the things, I love it. Like,
Mhm.
but I don't know. With children's literature, that's definitely obviously very different,
Right.
Yeah. And there was something in, let's see my notes, if it was in the video, I think it was in the video where they were talking about like the level that kids read on. They said boys tend to read more on their age appropriateness level, whereas
Mhm.
girls read on a higher level, maybe not higher Lexile level, but like just as far as age appropriateness goes.
Mhm.
And I started thinking about that because I did have middle schoolers who were reading Colleen Hoover books this year. And I was like, it's so inappropriate for you.
I haven't even read a Colleen Hoover.
It's
I don't really know what they were
it's
about.
inappropriate for a middle schooler.
Mm.
But at the same time, where was I going with this? Sorry. I just took some NyQuil before I started this too.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
But it kind of, it makes me wonder, like, what should we be pushing? And pushing may not even be the right word, but what should we be pushing our students to read?
Yeah.
Because
I mean, I think what you're saying is true. Like there are just some things that are just, no matter how mature you think you are, you're not there yet. And like you just don't
Right.
get to step into that realm just yet. But like that's also part of like what kids are consuming in general. Their parents need to be monitoring it, you know?
right, and they're
Like
not.
they
Yeah, they're
can't
not at
get
all.
that book, you know, from anywhere.
Right.
Just like they can't get video games usually on their own. Somebody has to buy it for them.
Right.
I know one thing that stood out to me is, I can't remember who said it, but one of them had said that there's a higher tolerance for violence versus like sexuality and gender and
Mhm.
stuff
There
like that.
is. Yeah. And why is that? Like, when did violence become the norm?
Right.
Yeah. And when did sexuality become such an evil force that had to be like more
Right.
banned or shielded, but showing our kids people being ripped apart was okay, you know?
Because I wrote like, what happened to leave them some to the imagination part of the world? Like, what happened to
Leave
that?
some to imagination.
Yeah.
What happened to that? Why is nothing left?
I think we live in a world now where like everything is just literally so readily available. There almost is, kind of sad to say, there is nothing to imagine. Like you can
Mhm.
literally look up
Yeah.
anything
Kids don't
and
know how to
figure
use
it
their
out.
imagination.
No, not anymore.
They don't.
You can look up anything, it's right at your fingertips. You can
Mhm.
download it, you can be immersed in it, you could put it on a headset. Like there's
Right.
just
It's
so many
everywhere.
things.
But that also goes back to like the problem solving skills. That's why they can't solve anything, because they don't
Yeah.
know how to use their imagination. They've never had to.
Right. It's the
Yeah.
world we live in these days.
I feel like this is stuff like our parents used to say.
Mhm.
Now we're saying it.
Yeah.
We
I
just sound
know.
like our parents.
Indeed. Because
I
like,
also thought a good point somebody made was I agree that kids aren't typically going to read about something and then immediately go do it.
Right.
Mhm.
I think it was the older woman, and I can't remember her name, but she was saying like, you know, when they take in something, they're not just gonna like turn around and commit it. Like it doesn't work
Right.
that quickly.
right.
You know, you talk about what you're exposing kids to and stuff, but then again, there are some kids that do, but I think those kids that do things like that are more of like the what's the word, like the anomaly, the few and far betweens, like, okay, wasn't expecting that to happen type of thing. But
Mhm.
I think we're giving maybe almost too much power to one thing, and I think it's a combination of things for sure.
Mhm.
I don't know, it's tricky.
I agree. When I read the article, what happened to the Golden Door, there was a part in there that asked like, whose voices are being left out of curriculum, whose stories are buried. And I feel like if we don't talk about the things in history, including the violence,
As they happen. I feel like
right,
that was a huge part that I kept reading throughout that text, was like saying it how it
as
happened.
Mhm.
exactly how it
They
happened,
said not the
not
textbook
just
version of history. I liked that.
right,
Mhm.
without the historical exclusions. We're not giving justice to our students when we're only giving them bits and pieces, when we're only giving them what the state wants us to teach,
Mhm.
that point of view only. And I thought that was a good point in that article, is that there's so many voices being left out, because we're following the state guidelines or the state curriculum,
Mhm.
and we're only giving them bits and pieces of the history.
Yeah, because that goes back like our conversation from last week, like state make decisions, but they're never the ones in the classroom to know that
Right.
this is what we need. This is what they need we need to talk about to help our kids so they understand what's going on, like in the world around them. But they make all these decisions, but they're not there to really kind of help understand and make
Correct.
sense of it.
But I also think about our conversation. I think our first meeting ever, we talked about like the whole banning books things, and it's like how people are like rewriting history, and we're leaving people like and their voices and their stories out, like Anne Frank and stuff like that, because it's too
Mhm.
much. And it's like that's someone's real experience. And then
Right.
what is the service we're doing to our kids by not teaching them the full story? I mean, you're just teaching them half of, and I think about like different people in history that were just undeniably like bad people. And
Mhm.
there seems to be no issue with giving all the details about exactly how bad they were, but then they pick and choose the details they give about other people. And it's like, no, let's join in on the parade. Let's be honest. Like, let's just
Right.
give all of it as it is. And then you have people who, who don't go to college and they won't get that opportunity to maybe have a professor that teaches them all
Mhm.
those little tiny crumbs that were left out and stuff like that.
Right.
And were amended to seem better. And it's like, but why make it seem better than it is? And I always feel like there's particular parts of history that they try to shape just a little differently so they don't seem as bad. And it's like,
Mhm. I agree.
why? Why are we doing that?
Why are
Just
we trying to change history?
Right. Wow.
I can
make
see
somebody feel
changing the
better.
present or changing the future based on history. Or why
Mhm.
are we
Yeah.
trying to change history in general? You
Right.
can't.
Because it's really this stuff that really is going on and really happening, and it's
Right.
important too. History is always important.
Right. I think that where the author talked about the research project that she did with the kids on immigration groups. I think the stuff that is left out of the curriculum,
Mhm.
this project leads to all those things. And I think that's a great way to get students involved in wanting to know more is by giving them these research type projects. And I like how she said, like, she made suggestions on different immigration groups and they're like, no, I want to do this one or I want to do this one because they had a personal tie to it.
Yeah. That personal tie will always make someone work like way harder for something because they're
Absolutely.
connected to it and they want to figure out all the things. And I
Mhm.
just like how she had them super immersed into like the project itself and how I don't know. I like when people get invested in what they're doing. I thought
Me
it was
too.
cute. Not cute, but
I love doing research projects with my kids. And even like how could y'all use an assignment like this in your classrooms?
Mhm.
Like just based off of any literature book you were reading.
I will say the research we did last semester, I wasn't particularly proud of. And that's something I want to do a little bit better on this year when it comes to looking into things. I don't know, my kids, I don't want to blame it all on them, but they were just like, Miss Weaver, let's just do the bare minimum and get this product over with. And I was like, I don't like that. But I like that idea of like putting them into groups based on what they're interested in. I know one of my professors in undergrad did that. Like she didn't put us in groups, like depending on what we chose was how we were grouped. And so in a
Right.
way, it's like you didn't necessarily choose your group members, but you ended up in a group of people who already have a similar line of thinking or a similar interest as you.
Mhm.
And then that also teaches you how to work with other people and stuff like that. Um, for 10th grade, it's all world literature. So I'm trying to think of like different texts that we'll read this year. Again, I only taught one semester, so I only know second semester.
Right.
But I think it would definitely be, I like the idea. I like the immigration project and just like the idea of putting them together and forcing them to dig deeper into someone or something or like an event. We had talked about, since it's world literature, like doing a project that like allows the kids to like introduce themselves and their culture or maybe where they come
Right.
from and talking about like their what's the word, like family traditions and things. And
Mhm.
then because we love food, we were going to make it food tied. And at the end of it, they were going to have to do a written component, but also bring in a dish that ties into their culture, explains like their family traditions. But it would be the written concept of it that like obviously give them a grade and then why. And it's like obviously everybody comes from somewhere,
Right.
so
Right.
they have to include that piece of information about what it means to them or why it's so important or why it reminds them of home and stuff like that. And I know people love talking about themselves, and especially people that are very passionate about where they're from. They do a really good job repping it. And so I don't
Right.
know. I just thought it was like a cool little way. We haven't like smoothed it out yet. It's all in the works. Honestly, when post planning hit, we just stopped talking about anything
Wrap.
school related and just
Yeah.
wrapped it up and left. So it'll be a pre-planning conversation.
I think that's a
And,
great idea for a project though, for,
Yeah.
that's
And that's
great.
something even with like the younger kids, we can still do like
Yeah.
family tree project. Like tell us about your family history and
Right.
kind of just
Yes.
bring it all in.
And I like the part about making them research into it. So like, don't just tell me what like you guys do on the surface. Like I want you to look into it, because there's more than likely, like, even though this is a tradition you guys are used to, there's a reason behind it. Like there's a
Mhm.
reason to
Right.
use this recipe this way, and like the places that things come from and why it's native to your country or whatever it is. And there's just so many things behind that. And so I think it would be really cool for them to find like those underlying connections to, what they do every day in their homes, and don't even
Mhm.
realize how tied it is to, their history. Or, when people like interview, they have to interview their grandparents on something. I
Yeah.
always think those are really cool projects. I haven't done something like that since like middle school though.
Yeah. We do mini research projects throughout the year, and it all leads up to like a big research project at the end of the year.
Mhm.
But just teaching the basic components of doing a research project. And we always start off with, what is your name? Where did it come from? What's the
Mhm.
origin? So like a lot of them were like, well, my name is this. And I got it from my mom, or I got it from my dad, but they don't
Right.
really know like the history behind it. And a lot of them are really shocked of why their parents chose that name.
Mhm.
A lot of them don't know ahead of time. So we do make them do a little bit of research as the origins of the names, and
Mhm.
like the
Cool.
countries they came from.
Mhm.
And then by the end of the year, we do the family tree project. And we include them having to do a video interview with somebody from their family that is 60 or older.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah. And for the most part, we've been able to do that. We've had a few kids who are like, I don't have anyone in my family, or the parents will email me and say that,
Aw.
which is fine. Then we make exceptions for that. But
Mhm.
we make them do the video interview. We make them research the country as far back as they can come up with, like where their family originated from. They have to be able to bring in so many informational texts about their
Aw.
family line. So that we're covering a lot of standards with
No,
that.
That's deep.
Yeah, that's what I said. Like we start doing
I
like
like
mini
that.
projects throughout the year, so that
Mhm.
they get the full concept of what it means to research something.
Mhm.
Because a lot of them, you give them a project, they're like, oh, well, I'll wait till a day or two before it's due, and then I'll start doing it. But if I've learned that doing the mini lessons throughout help them realize how much work it really takes to put into a research project.
Right.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So I liked being able to see her
We're over
version.
here
of the
promoting
research.
communication with people's families.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good one though. Because like your resources are somewhat at your fingertips too. You got to use them.
Mhm.
Right.
Talk to your family.
Go with the House on Mango Street.
Mhm.
Have you ever read that?
No, that was
I
my first time.
Yeah, I've kind of read it, but I really don't remember anything from that book.
Yeah. That's another one of those books that was pulled off of our shelves.
My goodness.
Yeah.
I was like I said, when I was reading,
Y'all have anything left?
Very
No.
we have a lot of
Mhm.
classics, like old books.
Mhm.
Great.
And that makes it even harder for us to get kids to buy in, because they don't feel like they can relate.
Well, it's
Right.
not relevant. It's not culturally relevant.
Right.
It's not relevant to their lives, which I think is something else. I can't remember what it's. Maybe it was the video, or I had it written down somewhere. I don't know. I had it written down somewhere how like it being relevant to what is going on in their lives will make it much more powerful,
Right.
for them to read it. Maybe it was a quote I had.
But that that article talks about that book being banned,
Mhm.
and it's because the girl Esperanza is sexually assaulted. So I get why in the middle school they don't want us to talk about that, but in reality, that
There are
happens,
people in middle school that is happening to.
right?
Mhm.
And there was a quote in the article, and it says, "Banning a book like this promotes silence."
Oh, I wrote that down too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and that made me really think, like, if we don't give an outlet to these kids, we really are promoting the silence. We're telling
Yeah,
them it's not okay to talk about this. It's not okay to report this.
Right.
You just need to sit
exactly.
back and be quiet. And that's not
We're
right.
teaching the victims to just put up with it essentially because
Right.
there's no outlet to talk about it. And then other people, like, you don't have to teach sympathy, but sometimes like you need to teach other people like what this might look like, what people might go through. And if it feels horrible to talk about, like imagine what it's like to live it.
To live it.
And then how do you
Exactly.
support, you know, a friend that maybe is going through something like that. And I think there was one of them, I can't remember if it was in the text or on this article itself, where it said like someone had said a comment about somebody being like sexually assaulted, and it's like, well, they shouldn't have done this or something like that. And it was like, see, those are the conversations
It
we
was
need
the
to.
video.
It was the
Um,
video. Okay.
Yeah, because the it may not have been the video.
I didn't think it was a
I
video.
can't
I thought
remember, but I
maybe it
do
was the
remember.
Saving Mango Street. And it was talking about, it might have been that or the text. And it was talking about how somebody was like, well, she shouldn't have been wearing this or doing this
No,
or something like
it
that.
was the video because the girl's mom told her she could go get any book she wanted. And the
Okay.
book she picked up was talking about sexual abuse.
You just
And
Gotcha. I knew I had heard it or read it on one of these
yeah,
things.
it was in the
There was a
video.
lot more things this week. I was trying to keep it
There
all
was.
organized.
There was.
But I feel like that is a conversation that needs some guidance in like a classroom or like a, you know, adult setting to like say like, hey, like, not mad at you for thinking that way because it is a thought that is perpetuated to a lot of people, but that's not the right way of like thinking about that. And here's why, you know, that explanation. And it's like you would hate for someone to go into a space and say that around someone who is a victim,
Right.
not realizing how heavy their words are and how much they would hurt.
In the video, they said there were two heroes in that situation: the mom for allowing her daughter to go get whatever book she wanted, and then the librarian for having books like that readily available for
Yeah.
kids to get. And I think that goes back to banning and like school districts saying you can't have this book out or you can't have that book out. Or I can't remember which one of you went to try to check out a book and it said that there were so many of them available, but
I was
it was Chrissy.
No.
But like they were pushed
Couldn't
to the
find it.
back somewhere.
Mhm.
Like,
Was it the Melissa book last week? I feel like.
Mhm. The
oh
most.
yeah.
Yeah. It
So
was that one.
like kudos to the librarians and the teachers who have these types of books available, even if you don't use them as a whole class reading,
Right.
just to have them available for your students.
To read if they're interested.
Right.
Mhm.
That always makes me think of like 13 Reasons Why in middle school, and people were very like wary of people reading it because it talked about suicide and stuff like that. But I was like, but this is real. Like there are people who do this. Like there are students that we have lost recently, you know, to this, and we need to have
Right.
these uncomfortable conversations and these things that is one of those, like you said, speaks directly about experience like this promotes silence, because if we're not talking about it, then that is the problem. Like
Mhm.
through and
Exactly.
through. And I thought it was funny how it was always, well, it's always funny that all these chapters all come back to books being banned and challenged and talking about being like too mature. And it's just like, what is
Right.
too mature these days though? Like, let's be real,
Let's
because
be
these
real.
kids are seeing things and unfortunately experiencing things sometimes out of their, you know, control. But
Mhm.
if it's too mature for them to read, it's also too mature for it to happen to them. But if it
Mhm.
can happen to them, then like it's worth having a discussion about.
Right.
Truly.
And things are happening to these kids and they're being put in situations a lot earlier now than when we were younger.
Mhm.
It's sad. Yeah.
Especially the violence part of it.
Yeah.
I know of at least 5 teenagers in the county I live in that were killed to gun violence this school year.
Wow.
Just senseless stuff that
Mhm.
our kids are having to deal with, whether it be a family member that has been killed or a friend. Like a lot of them lost classmates.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And those are conversations that, yeah, we have school counselors that help deal with that, but
Mhm.
we have two
Not
school
everybody's going to
counselors,
reach out.
right?
Right.
And if, like you said, they won't all reach out. They don't know the counselors like that unless they're just a frequent
Yeah.
flyer to the
Yeah.
counseling office.
Frequent flyer.
I mean, we have those frequent flyers. They
Indeed.
have to go up there for everything, but
Mhm.
they may not be comfortable talking to them about it. Whereas they may be
Yeah.
more comfortable in your classroom because they spend so much time with you. And if we allow ourselves to have those types of conversations with the kids and let them know this is a safe space for you to talk,
Right.
then we can be more supportive than,
Yeah. That makes me
I
think about the
think
book,
it's-
The Freedom Writers,
yes,
Mm.
love
and how
that.
they use that time period to write about their experiences and the things that they were going through, and it kind of, it helped them feel better. And then, like I said, they made the connection to Anne Frank, so they kind of was seeing the similarities of, their lives and her lives and how
Right.
everything they went through. And I think they understood each other better, and it was like that communication.
Yeah.
They were kind of getting things out that, like, "Oh, this is happening to me. I need to, write it down and get it out." And my classmates are experiencing the same things that I am. So
Yeah.
that's what that made me think about. It's just the freedom writers and how important it is to kind of, like I said, to get it out in the open and talk to whoever, where you feel
I
comfortable.
think what often happens is like they wait for a situation to occur.
Mhm.
And then they're like, oh, it's like a week-long thing, like, oh, well, the support is here if you need it, come see
Right.
us in the counselor's office or
They're
this
reactive instead of
website. And
proactive.
it's
Mhm.
definitely very reactive. And like I said, it lasts for like maybe a week after the incident and then just kind of fades out. And then another incident happens. And then we do that same
Right.
thing. And it's like, we shouldn't be doing it in this cycle, in this way, the whole
Right.
thoughts and prayers thing. Like, no, we need to be a little more proactive, a little more planned out. Let's already be having these conversations about what's going on. So it's not this uncomfortable or taboo topic, or we're not waiting for something big to blow up and really,
Mhm.
really drastically affect someone's life and then do something about it or then talk to other people about it. But it's like, imagine if you would have had those conversations earlier, what that could have meant to the person that, kind of suffered there.
That kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with history and them trying to leave certain parts of history out.
Mhm.
The whole point in studying history is so that we don't repeat the same mistakes and so that we can
Exactly.
learn from the past.
Right.
But how can they take pieces of it out, and how can they challenge history that is obviously true, that has actually happened,
Mhm.
if we're not using the events that have happened in our communities and in our schools to help teach our kids better coping skills and better ways of communication and better ways to deal with things, then what's the point?
Yeah, I would agree. And then I worry, like, when people do find out maybe the other side of like what they weren't learning in school, is it just turn into like a rumor mill instead of like backed by
Right.
like facts? Like,
That's
Right.
scary in itself.
well, I heard that Rosa Parks did, and, it's like,
Mhm.
this is something we should be learning in general. I remember being in, what was it, like first, second semester history, and like it was a lot of the same topics, but there was always another layer that we hadn't learned before. And I was like,
Mhm.
was everything a lie? Like, what did I actually learn? If like there's so much more to, I mean, I know there's so much more to history than what we learned in school, but like they're unveiling so much more here about the same events that we've already talked about, and they just conveniently left it out. And I always thought that was so crazy. I mean, it was like mind blowing. I actually found history a little bit more exciting because it was like we were finding out stuff you could never known before. And I was just like, oh my gosh. And that was the first time I realized that like there was just stuff that they were just choosing not to include. Like our textbooks just chose, or whoever wrote it and published it and all that stuff just chose to completely omit it. But it was like I couldn't help but think, like, for what? Like, who are you protecting, or whose
Mhm.
image are you trying to save in this process?
Right. They're trying to push their own agenda. They only want you to see what they like.
Right.
what they approve of, you knowing.
Yeah.
Mhm. That's that censorship.
Yeah. I think about like the story, I had it written down here for Long Way Down, that pain will cause such a whirlwind of emotions. And kind of how we talked about being able to communicate and get it off your chest in a safe and effective manner is so huge, because look at what it led him into doing. He was contemplating doing something really unthinkable,
Mhm.
all because he didn't know how to deal with his emotions or problem solve effectively. And he's here
Right.
sitting here thinking like he can solve this all by himself. Like, he's got this out, everybody else has done it. Like, what's it to do it again? And it's like, no.
Following the rules.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Do y'all have any books that you could see using in your classrooms that deal with these type of topics?
I don't. But I was thinking about the Three Little Pigs, and I said the Three Little Ghost Scrubs, they all have violence in them.
Right.
Battles.
And that's even mentioned in here.
It is,
Like,
it comes up a lot.
yeah, like the even at a young age, we teach good versus evil.
Right.
I
Good
wrote that
triumphs
down.
evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's like everybody's trying to, avoid the trouble and the bad guy. And it's always that superhero that comes and saves the day, like the big brother. The big brother comes and
Yeah.
saves the day.
But even then, sometimes like the good that's triumphing evil, sometimes technically like they're killing them off, but it's just not so
Mm-hmm.
graphic. Like, it's just
Right.
not so, crazy and whatnot as
Mm-hmm.
some of the other things that we read or see. I don't know. I mean, like, we read The Great Gatsby, which technically I guess has gun violence in it because George Wilson shoots Gatsby in the end. Um, and that all goes back to just misleading information. The wrong person kind of takes the fall for it, blah, blah, blah. And we actually did like this year, my 11th graders, we did a mock trial. So we had two different sides. We had the defense and the, what's the other side? I can't even think of it off the top of my head.
Prosecution.
Yes, the prosecution and the defense, and who they thought should be on trial for the murder of Myrtle Wilson. And then we had different people play like different characters to like go up on the stand and do stuff. And some classes took it more seriously than others. But it was really funny. They had to use like textual evidence from the book to support what they were saying. But I don't know. I don't feel like we talked a whole lot about like Gatsby's killing, because it just, I don't want to say we're desensitized, but it just wasn't like the huge thing of the story. Like, yes, he died, and he ended up not getting the girl and everything that he was chasing after, and that wasn't the moral. That wasn't the message in a sense. And so, like, we didn't talk about it that much. Like, they were all shocked by it, because they didn't see it coming. But I don't know. It wasn't like at the time. It wasn't meant to talk about gun violence or problem solving or anything like that. I could see how it could be though. But I don't know. But I also feel like 9th through 12th grade would be a really good time to talk about that kind of stuff. Like, even with a story like this, because they are getting older and they're about to go and have really real consequences for their actions if they make those kind of mistakes. But it's just a matter of trying to figure out where it would fit in the like curriculum, I feel like.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's one
I
thing
also
that
think it's
has
good 'cause
always,
it's,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I also think it's a good story because, like the author was saying, it's written in more of like a poetry style and more like the way people talk, probably more the way the kids talk, and not like this hard to read, like cryptic message that sometimes text can be. So maybe to be a little bit more relatable in that
And I
sense.
think using the word poetry scares kids.
It does.
I'm not a big fan of poetry myself. So I think if we were to give them this and not tell them that it's written in poetry form, there's a book that we read in 8th grade called Bronx Masquerade, and
I think I've heard of that.
it's written in slam poetry style.
What is it about?
I haven't read it. They teach it in the other 8th grade groups. But it's like it's in our 8th grade curriculum. I do
feel like
Orbiting
I've read
Jupiter instead.
I
Um,
actually have that written down to read.
Orbiting Jupiter, such a good
Yeah.
book. Such a good book. But it is written in like slam poetry style, and the kids, the other teacher that teaches it, she never tells them that it's poetry, but she does show them videos of slam poetry
Mhm.
before it starts, and then allows them to write their own slam poem at the end. But she says that it never clicks to them until the end that the book is written in poetry form.
No, because they always
Because-
think of poetry being like this one
Mhm.
thing, and it's like, no. I know there's another teacher I follow on Instagram who they do a March Madness poetry competition, but they
Yeah,
do it
like
with
song
like
lyrics versus poems.
yeah,
Yeah.
she does like Tupac a lot versus other poets and stuff, and I always think that's
Yeah.
really, really cool. But then I'm like worried. I'm like, one day are they gonna know who Tupac is?
Right. Right.
No,
They're
they'll
getting
wear them
old.
on a t-shirt and you'll say, who is that? And they're like, I don't know, I just like the t-shirt.
That's my favorite thing to do. I'm like,
Yeah.
who are you wearing? Do you know who that is? And they're like, no.
Name a song they sang. That's all.
They
Yeah.
never know.
They
They
never
don't.
know.
It's just for the fashion. It's horrible.
Yeah.
We actually we did when we were doing the Harlem Renaissance, one of their mini projects was they had to pick a person and then make like a Instagram page for them, like an
Oh.
Instagram profile for them. And that was kind of funny because they had to like come up with captions, and then like I asked them like, how many likes do you think this person would get? Like, you know,
Mhm.
because they're all into that kind of stuff, like why? And they had to justify that. And they had to justify like the comments, like were they friends with other people from the Harlem Renaissance that maybe would have supported them, or would people have been hating on them? Like so
Mhm.
many different things. And so some of the captions they came up with were hilarious. Some of them got really creative and some of them were a little boring, but it's okay. Everybody can't be super out of the box. But it was funny. I enjoyed that one. I would do something like that again, even though I don't have them.
We've done the mock trial too with the outsiders
So that
to
would be a good one.
debate whether or not the murder was self-defense. And
Oh,
we
that's a good idea.
we always have the kids like dress up. Like if you want to choose the role of a lawyer, you better come looking like a lawyer. And we have kids come in suits and ties.
Oh.
I love that.
Yeah.
Look at her.
I'm like, I want to teach older grades now. Oh man. Okay.
But look, there's
Be
a
careful what you
and
wish for.
I don't know if you would do this in like elementary
Mhm.
or like, could you teach kindergarten, right?
Yes.
Uh-oh. Sorry. My screen just went crazy. I don't know if you would do this in kindergarten, but you could probably do like a version of it. But there's a SpongeBob trial where they're trying to like prove if Mr. Krabs murdered somebody or SpongeBob murdered somebody. So I don't necessarily know that you would do the murder part of it, but you could do
Tweak it a little bit.
yeah, you could tweak it a little
Yeah.
bit, have them do
You can be
that.
like, is so and so guilty of, I don't know.
Overcooking the Krabby Patty or something like
You know who would
that.
have been a good one?
Yes.
Do you guys ever read what is that series called? The Pug. What is his name? Doug the Pug? No. Dang, now I have to look it up because it's gonna bother me.
I was like, oh,
But he's usually like really mischievous little pug.
I know what you're talking about. It's
I can't think of his name.
'cause
Pig the Pug. I don't know why I couldn't think of that. We have like the Halloween one and the Christmas one, like Pig the Fibber, Pig the Stinker, Pig the Elf. Like they look like this.
I feel like I have one of those
So
books up
cute.
there. I do. I have the red one.
You could use I don't know, something
gotta go
like that.
find it.
Like what was he guilty of? I don't know.
Yeah, I gotta go find it. So I could do that.
I could even see you doing that with like if you give a mouse a cookie, like
Oh yeah.
come through like the end, like all these things that have happened.
Mm-hmm.
Who did it? Like proof who
Right.
did it without
Who
reading the
stole cookie
story.
from the cookie
Yeah.
jar.
Like that whole series. I could see you doing like a debate or mock trial thing with that.
I want to try it out. Okay, I'm excited now.
Look at us.
Right.
Look at us making lesson plans for kindergarten. Who would ever thought?
Well, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna try it out. But I'm sure they'll still have fun with that.
That also would be a good way to tie in, like, how could we have better solved this problem?
Right.
Talk
Yeah.
about conflict resolution at the end of that. Instead of just stealing the cookie or instead of lying or doing stuff like that, it could be a little more toned down.
Going
Right.
deep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How can we
Using
be
your
problem
board to
solvers?
ask questions.
That's one of our standards.
Yep.
And when you do it, let us know so we can come.
I know. I will.
I'll be too far away, but you can video it.
Yeah.
I'll join in
I
on
think we're
Zoom.
all far away.
I'll zoom you in.
We'll zoom in.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna put that in the plans.
All right. Was there anything else out of this week's readings or video that
I
Yeah,
had
one-
wrote down something from the video that one of them mentioned for her book that she had wrote about like coming into the world and those
Mhm.
first like few hours of being alive, like your birthday.
Yeah.
And she said her book was challenged over a child seeing breastfeeding. And I was like, seriously, like it's the most natural thing in the world. And she was saying like the illustrator who drew the picture, you couldn't even fully see like, you know, the whole thing, but they were like,
Mhm.
nobody between the ages of, I can't remember what they said, like 4 or 3 to 5 should see that. And I was like, there's so many people though whose parents are, you know, still having like their younger siblings and are probably doing that at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel
Yeah.
like, why are
Even
we making
other
that
cultures.
a taboo thing? And the
Mhm.
thing is kids think nothing of it. It's always everybody
Right.
else.
Mhm.
It's always an
Making a big
adult or
deal.
something in the room making a big deal out of it. But to them, it is so normal, so natural. It's not gross or sexual or anything like that.
Mhm.
It's always someone else. And I was like, why can't they see that? I mean, they probably did the same thing.
Right.
I think
And then I,
what you just said about like it's always the adults who are making an issue out of it. I think that goes a lot further than just like the breastfeeding issue.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
A lot of the books that are banned are because of what
An
is seen
adult.
through adults' eyes, not
Mhm.
because of what kids have reacted to or
Right.
what kids have thought about it. It's
It's what
always
the
how the
Yeah, that's
adults
very
see
true.
it.
adults is assuming. Mm-hmm.
like it's not like a kid is coming up and is like, hey, something's happening in this book that's not appropriate. It's always an adult that's like, oh no, they can't
Right.
handle this. They can't do this. And it's
Mhm.
like, you gotta stop. You gotta
Right.
stop thinking that. They
Literally
definitely make a
kids.
bigger deal out of some of the things in the text. I can't remember when it was saying where the wild things really are. I don't
Mhm.
remember if I actually heard that throughout the video or not. Something about, because I remember it was mentioned in one of the other chapters about why it had been like banned or challenged, and I think I thought it was from like him running away or like the psychological warfare or something like
Uh-huh.
that. And I was just like, oh my god, I would have never ever
Ever.
thought that in a million years. And I highly doubt any kid is like, my psyche is messed up after reading this book. Like,
Yeah.
Exactly.
no,
None of them.
not a single one.
Read it
Like, I don't
again,
know
read
a
it
single
again.
one that's like run away because of it or something like that. Because if anything, when he ran away, he was alone and a little scared. So
Right.
like, why would they turn around and want to feel that way? Like,
Mhm.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, it
Exactly.
plays on the imagination part that they're
Yeah.
that we say they're lacking.
Mm.
All right. Is there anything else?
Not from me.
I'm good.
All right. We have met our hour quota. I will get this typed up and sent in,
Sounds good.
and then I will pass the baton on.
I feel like it's just gonna circle back around.
Yep, back around.
Oh
Fun
man.
times.
All right. I'll see y'all next week.
All
All right,
right.
sounds
See
good.
ya. Have a good night. Feel better.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.